Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we are outsmarting smart shapes again. We are going to look at the settings for all of the beat attached lines in Finale, and basically that's everything from the decrescendo here all the way through to the dashed line. So that's 12 tools within the smart shape palette that we're going to look at today, starting with the hairpins. And let me just zoom in a little bit. Now, the settings for the hairpins can be found in the Smart Shape options, and everything to do with hairpins is in this bottom left corner where it says crescendo, decrescendo, and we only have a few options for it. The short span opening width, the maximum short span length, long span opening width, and line thickness. Now, what this is, this short span, long span deal here, is if you look at this first measure, you'll see these hairpins, and both of these hairpins have different openings. The width of the opening is different, right? This one's a little bit smaller than the second one here, right? And this is controlled by these settings. There is a short span opening width. That's the width of the hairpin from the end of the line right there. And there is a maximum short span length, and in this case it's 0.86806. So what this means is that any hairpin that's this length, 0.86806, or shorter will use this short span opening width of 0.09, right? Any hairpin that's longer than the short span length will use the long span opening width, which is, as you can see, a different opening width of 0.125 versus 0.09, which is why these two hairpins have different opening widths. And you can see the result of this. If you start to actually drag this hairpin around, you'll see it jump to match that opening width. And the reason for that is because when I do that, I'm crossing that threshold from the short span to the long span. So I've effectively defined this hairpin now as a long span, so it's using that long span width. And again, if I go left to shorten it, you can see that it takes on the short span opening width, if that makes sense. All right, so if you play with these options a little bit, if you feel like this length is a little bit too long to maintain that or to switch over to that short span opening width, you can make this short span length a little bit shorter so that it takes a shorter hairpin to get to that short span opening width. If for whatever reason you feel that the opening width should not change depending on the length of the span, then make these two options the same. The first and the third option, make them exactly the same. If you set them both to 0.125, there will be no difference in that opening width, regardless of how long or short that hairpin is. All right. And then finally, the bottom with the line thickness, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's set to 0.00765, but if we change this a little bit, you can actually see you can create some much thicker hairpins to taste if you want to. And that's what that does. And finally, the bottom section here, the bottom option here, make horizontal by default, also applies to the crescendo and decrescendo. And I think I talked about this a little bit in the previous video on hairpins and how to work with them. If we uncheck this, now when we create hairpins, Finale is going to allow us to sort of freely draw them any which way we want to, which sometimes is good, but sometimes it's not. 99% of the time, you should probably leave that checked. However, if you do have it unchecked, holding down Shift will actually revert it back to horizontal. You can see I'm moving my mouse up and down, and that hairpin is remaining horizontal. Incidentally, after you draw it with that option unchecked, you can go about and change the angle of it at will, unless you also hold Shift, in which case you'll restrain it to horizontal. All right, so the Shift key will actually override this option being turned off. All right, but again, 99% of the time, make it horizontal by default, and you'll be much happier. And of course, we can override it individually by right-clicking the handle of any hairpin and unchecking Make Horizontal. And of course, when we do that, now we can go ahead and change it to angle it if we need to. And of course, I think holding Shift in this instance will also restrict it to horizontal. All right. So it's a lot of somewhat confusing options about horizontal, but in any case, Shift will always constrain it to the horizontal. Okay, so that is hairpins. So let's talk about trills next. And with trills, there's not a whole lot you can do, but the options for those also exist in the Smart Shape Options dialog box. And in this case, we're looking at this top section here where it says symbols, and we have 6 options here. It's the bottom 2 we're concerned about for the trill. And the first one where it says trill, this concerns the actual character here, the TR symbol. And that TR symbol is basically a character within the Maestro font. So if you actually press select, you'll get the selector for the Maestro character set, and you'll see Trill is selected. Of course, you could choose any other character here, but that would replace that Trill symbol with that character. So I'm not exactly sure how useful that would be. You can always set the font if you want your Trill to be a little bit bigger or smaller. You can change it from 24 to 22 right here, or a little bigger to 26 or something. Or you can actually change the font of the Trill character itself. If you don't like this particular Trill, you could maybe choose the engraver Trill instead, and it will look slightly different. If I can find that real quick, engraver font, you'll see that the Trill will be slightly different, right? So that's an option if you want. Let's go back to Maestro though. And the other thing that you can change, sorry, let me just go back and do this. I have too many fonts. The other thing you can change besides the Trill character is the Trill extension. And again, this is also a character within the Maestro font. And specifically, it's this character here that looks like a single wavy line, I guess. And what Finale is doing is it's putting a bunch of them one after another in order to create that wavy Trill extension. And whatever you have set here, by the way, the wavy line setting will affect not only the Trill with the extension line, but also the extension line without the Trill, which is this tool right next to the Trill, right? So that's how you would do that. And with the Trill, we can only have the Trill horizontal by default. You can't even override it with the contextual menu. Nothing shows here. You can't override the Trill line to be on an angle. If we wanted to have the Trill line in an angle, we'd have to actually create a whole nother custom smart shape with the Trill, basically replicating the Trill line itself with the extension as a custom line. So then we can actually make it not horizontal if we need to. And also with Trills, you notice here I put a Trill on this last bar of the system going into the first bar of the next system. By default, Finale will not put parentheses around a TR symbol on the continuation of a Trill. I've seen it where that is something that people may want to do. In order to get that, you would actually have to create a custom line, and I'm going to show you that because I actually created some of those in this particular file. And incidentally, in the previous video, I did talk about the Trill with the flat, sharp, and natural sign. So again, that's as a custom line. But the Trill with the continuation parentheses over around the Trill, I did create 4 of those here in this file, and I'll show you just a little bit of how I did that. I'm going to edit it so you can see the Smart Line Designer. Now go ahead and pause the video at any point here to sort of copy down these settings. What you should be concerned about is that you want it to be a character, horizontal, Maestro 24 plane. The character is that wavy line character again with this VEMS, vertical EMS setting, Maestro 24 plane. These settings for the line adjustment. And then I'm going to show you what I did with the left start is the Trill character from the Maestro font 24 plane. The positioning, you can copy these numbers if you want. Pause and copy. With the left continuation, it's the Trill character, but also with the parentheses from the Maestro font as well. It's same all 24 plane. And the position for the left continuation, same. You can copy that if you need to. And that's how you would get that. For the ones with the flat, sharps, and naturals, it is a little bit more complicated because that flat symbol has a baseline shift and all that stuff. So it's actually easier to copy and copy these guys and then add the parentheses to the continuation. But you can kind of see how I did that there. And here's the left continuation, and you kind of see sort of how that flat symbol has a baseline shift. It's a little bit complicated, but I think what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to export these as a library file, and I'm going to post that file on my website because I'm a nice guy, and so you'll have these 4 trills with the parentheses in the continuation at your disposal if you want them. It will only be for the Maestro font. I haven't done them for the other fonts in Finale, but that's not a bad start. All right, so that is all you got to know about trills. And then let's look at octave lines. Now, the setting for the octave lines are also in the Smart Shape options. And you'll see in the symbols section we have 4 options for octave up, octave down, 2 octave ups, 2 octaves up, and 2 octaves down. And essentially what we can do with all 4 of these is, again, change the character or change the font. You can change the size if you want it to be a little bit bigger or smaller. You can change the font itself if you want to use the engraver font or something else. So basically, that's pretty much all there is to do. Again, with the octave down, by default, Finale uses 8VA, not 8VB. Once again, I'm not going to take sides on this debate, but if you want the 8VB, choose Select. It is in the Maestro font set, and the 8VB is slot 215, which is a little bit further down. There it is, 215. And if you select that one instead, you'll see this 8VA below here turn into an 8VB. Same thing with 15MA octave down. If you want 2 octaves down with a B at the end, this is character slot 96, so it's a little bit higher here. Go up to 96. Where is it? There it is. Did I get it? There you go, 15MB. And you'll get your 15MB, which I didn't actually put in the score, but we can do that real quick. There's the 15MB. All right, and again, with these octave lines, the hooks will be up or down based on where you enter it, right? With the, if you put it on, oops, that's attached to the top staff there. If you put it on the top, the hook will go down. If you put it on the bottom, the hook will go up, right? Now, one thing about these octave lines is that you'll notice that you only have the option for 8VA and 15MA. There is no option in Finale for 22MA or 3 octaves. I know it's a rare thing to see, but you may actually have a use for that occasionally. If you do, you are going to have to create a custom shape, custom smart line. And in fact, I have done that in this particular file below my trills here. I've got 3 versions of the 22MA. Now, the tricky thing about the 22MA is that the 8VA, 8VB, 15MA, and 15MB are all single characters within the Maestro font. There is no single character for 22MA or 22MB within the Maestro font. So you do actually have to cheat it a little bit to create, you kind of have to type it, a 2, an M, and an A. And when you do that, you have to sort of futz with the fonts, the sizes, and the baseline shift for the MA and MB in order to get it right. So it is a little bit more complicated, but let me just show you really quickly what I've done. Again, pause and copy these settings if you want. Right, we definitely want the dashed line with these thickness and settings here, the line adjustment settings here, the hook. Now, the thing with the hook is that because the hooks in the custom lines are absolute, you do have to create 2 versions of this, one with an up hook and one with a down hook, depending on which side you want the 22MA to be on, because the hooks will not flip as custom smart lines, right? So you do have to create 2 of them. And let me just show you the left start. Again, it's a 22, and I'm using the Maestro Times 16 bold italic for the 22. That's the font you want to use. It looks very similar to those characters in the Maestro font set. For the MA, it's the same thing, Maestro Times 10 italic without the bold. And the MA has a baseline shift of this amount, basically 0.07. So you do have to have all of those settings very specifically to this in order to get the character and the positioning if you want to copy that. And same thing with the left continuation. Now, in this case, again, this is almost 3 different settings. We have Maestro Times 16 bold italic for the 22, 10 italic Maestro Times for the MA with that baseline shift value, all right, 0.07. The parentheses, however, come from the Maestro font and 24 plain. All right, no italics or anything with the parentheses. So it's actually 3 different fonts essentially for the 22MA with the parentheses. And the result, if I put this in my score as a custom line, let's do this, is a 22 MA. And actually, let me just add the 15 right below it so you can kind of see. And let me do one more thing here. I'm going to make this a little bit longer so you can see the continuation as well. Incidentally, I don't know if you noticed that little trick. In order to get the 22 MA to appear across the system break, sometimes it's easier to just move that measure up to the previous system and then move it back down, and instead of trying to figure out how to drag the extension all the way down to the next system. It can be done, but it's a little bit wonky. And I'm going to show you what I mean by the fact that it's close. Again, the 15 MA is a single character within the Maestro font set, so there's no way to actually completely reproduce this. The 22 MA looks very close with those settings, but you can notice particularly the M is definitely different than the M in the 15 MA. Again, this is the closest I could possibly get. The A is pretty close, and the numbers are pretty close, I think, but again, it's that M that's not quite exact. But again, you know, the 20, you're not going to use it very often, the 22 MA. But that's how you would do that. And let me just show you again in that custom line selection. Again, I've created 3 of them, the 22 MA with the hook going down for above the staff, the 22 MA with the hook going up. And if you want to see that, the hook in this case is a positive number versus the other one, which has a negative hook value of 0.04. Because again, the hook will not flip depending on if it's attached above or below. So in the custom line sense, you have to have 2 of them. And then one more for the 22 MB in case you want that for the underneath version of the 3-octave change. All right. And again, I'm going to do a nice thing for you all and export all 7 of these custom lines that I created into a library file, so you could actually add the trills with the parentheses and the 22 MA and 22 MB settings if you ever need them. Again, it's just for the Maestro font, but that's a nice thing for me to do for you all. And incidentally, if you wanted to see something like 8VA Bossa instead of just a plain 8VA, that's, again, you would have to create another custom line. In that case, you could use the 8VA character from the Maestro font and then use the Maestro Times font to create the Bossa text. I haven't created that in this particular file, but as you're getting used to working with smart lines, I think you can all figure that out by now. All right, and then finally, let's talk about there's one more thing I want to talk about in Octave Lines. Sorry, I almost missed it. Let's go back to Smart Shape Options. There is one final option for all 4 of these Octave Lines to use Octave's symbols as a text. And when you check this second option here, this will apply to all 4 of these options, the octave ups and the octave downs, and 15 or 2 octaves and single octaves and everything. When you check that, you'll see what happens. It will turn the 8VA into a simple 8, the 15 into a simple 15, just like that. And that's what's happening there. Once you do that, you can also change the font of that. And now in this case, this is using Maestro 24 plain for that text. There are actually basic numbers in the, there's basic number characters within the Maestro font that this is using. That's where that 8, 15, and 22 are coming from. But again, with that checked, you can only have the 8 and the 15 still. You can't have the 22. All right, so that's how that works. And now let's talk about the other bead attached lines, which are the hooked lines, the 4 hooked lines here and the 2 plain lines here. Now the settings for all of these lines are also in the Smart Shape options in the bottom right corner. We have the line thickness, the dash length, dash space, and hook length, which is the same as the octave lines. And actually, I didn't even mention that. These particular settings will apply to all of these hooked lines and plain lines and the octave extension lines, right? So just be aware that whatever you set here will affect all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 of those tools in the Smart Shape palette, right? So again, we have the options for line thickness, similar to the crescendo decrescendo, the dash length and the dash space. If we actually set these numbers a little bit differently, you could have the dash a little bit longer and the space a little bit shorter or something. and then the hook length. And again, in the case of the octave lines and these 4 hooked lines in the Smart Shape palette, the hook will flip depending on whether or not the, uh, the, the line is attached below the staff or above. You can see that right here where this hook at the end of this line is going upward. If I created that same hooked line above the staff, you see the hooked going downwards, right? So there's a difference between this and using a custom line where the hook is absolute, whether that be up or downwards, right? And these first 4 hooked lines will always be horizontal by default. We can change that by right-clicking and unchecking the make horizontal for that particular line. And when we do that, then we can actually start angling that line. And of course, interestingly, the hook itself will remain perpendicular to the staff line in this particular case, right? I think I mentioned this in one of the other videos, but if you were to do that with a custom line, the hook will remain perpendicular with the line itself, not with the staff. So that's another interesting detail. So I think that covers it. That's all of the beat attached lines. And incidentally, if you go through each and every one of these 12 tools that I just showed you, in the Smart Shape menu, the only option in this second section will be attached to beats. The other two options will always be grayed out. So it doesn't matter which one of these you choose. These are all always attached to beats. So that's why these are all categorized together. These 12 lines, the beat attached lines. And that's how you would adjust them. All right, so I hope this has helped. You've learned a lot about all of the beat attached lines in Finale, and hopefully that's helpful to you. So come back and we'll do some more videos on outsmarting smart shapes soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.